Okay, here's the translated and slightly expanded version of the text, aiming for clarity and a natural flow in American English. Here's the straightforward answer. Yes, a single acre can replace your winter hay needs, but this only works reliably within 3 specific farming systems. One system can produce roughly 5 to 8 tons of usable animal feed. Another yields approximately 3 to 6 tons, while a third falls in the 4 to 7 ton range, depending significantly on the timing of your management practices. Today, I'll break down precisely how each of these systems achieves those numbers, and just as importantly, where they tend to fall short. Most discussions avoid the nitty-gritty, so let's be clear from the start. Successfully overwintering livestock isn't simply about maximizing how much biomass an acre can grow. It's about maximizing how much of that growth an animal can effectively digest and consume during the winter months. Here's the key takeaway up front. If an acre consistently produces at least 4 tons of usable dry matter, it can replace hay entirely for 1,000 to 1,200 pounds cow for the entire winter feeding period. The problem isn't usually yield. Most acres don't fail because they lack biomass production, they fail on usability. Let me explain the core reasons why. In practical grazing scenarios, you can easily lose 15 to 35% of standing forage before it ever makes its way into an animal's digestive system. Weathering, trampling, frost damage, and even plant respiration all take their toll and shave off real tonnage. Importantly, winter feed isn't primarily a crude protein problem. It's more critically an energy and effective fiber problem. A forage might test at a seemingly high 16% protein, but still lead to starving animals if the neutral detergent fiber, NDF, is excessively high. Intake is the true gatekeeper here. Cattle generally need to consume about 1.8 to 2.6% of their body weight in dry matter each day. Goats and sheep require even more, around 3 to 4%. If forage digestibility drops, intake inevitably collapses, even if the standing biomass looks incredibly abundant. The lignin content in the plant's cell walls is the silent killer. Warm season forages can produce massive tonnage, but once lignin levels rise significantly, animals physically can't eat enough to meet their basic maintenance requirements. Volume isn't the primary issue, fermentation time in the rumen is. Here's a quick example to illustrate this point. A 10-ton sorghum crop that's allowed to reach the lignin threshold effectively acts like a 4-ton crop in the rumen. Conversely, a small 4-ton cool season forage mix with high digestibility can easily outperform it. This comparison sets the stage for everything that follows. Before we delve into specific systems, we need a clear benchmark. How much usable dry matter does 1 acre actually need to produce to adequately sustain 1 cow through the winter? Let's walk through the math step by step. Assume a cow weight of 1,100 pounds. The daily dry matter requirement is roughly 1.8 to 2% of body weight. That translates to approximately 20 to 24 pounds of dry matter per day. Over a typical 120-day winter feeding period, that accumulates to 2,400 to 2,880 pounds of dry matter the animal actually needs to ingest. But remember, that's just the intake requirement. That's not the production target. Now, we have to realistically account for the inevitable real-world penalties that every grazer faces. Weather-related losses can range from 15 to 35%, depending on the severity of snow, freeze-thaw cycles, and wind. Feeding and trampling losses can easily add another 10 to 20%, even under good management practices. When you factor in both weather and feeding losses, the acre needs to generate roughly 4 to 5 tons of usable dry matter to successfully feed 1 cow through the entire winter. That number, 4 to 5 tons of usable DM, is the critical bar that every system we examine has to clear. Some systems easily surpass it. Others may look impressive on paper in terms of total biomass, but ultimately fall short when you account for digestibility and actual animal intake. This baseline is the essential filter. Everything else in this video either meets it or fails. Let's start with the warm season powerhouse approach, sorghum and Sudan grass mixes, often combined with cowpeas and millet. These are commonly used across Texas, Missouri, Georgia, and many other regions, and the production numbers can be impressive. Yields of 6 to 10 dried tons per acre are common, and in areas with consistent rainfall, 12 plus tons isn't unusual. Crude protein levels can fluctuate from 9 to 18%, depending on the timing of your management. Standing forage typically ranges from 30 to 40% dry matter, the rest is water. So, from a pure biomass production standpoint, these systems appear unbeatable. They accumulate tonnage quickly and respond well to heat and nitrogen inputs. But here's where a deeper understanding of forage quality becomes crucial, the 45-day digestibility curve. Once these warm season grasses progress past the boot stage, the ADF, acid detergent fiber, and NDF numbers climb rapidly. After about 45 to 50 days, lignin becomes the primary limiting factor, not overall yield. When lignin content exceeds approximately 7%, animal intake typically starts to decline. Once it climbs significantly higher, cattle physically cannot consume enough forage to meet their energy needs, even if they are standing in a virtual wall of feed. When this system works optimally, it can absolutely replace winter hay, supporting 1 to 3 cows per acre in many regions. This success depends on grazing it as standing stockpile before the lignin spikes, or cutting it at the boot stage and allowing it to regrow, or pairing it strategically with legumes like cowpeas to boost energy and maintain consistent intake. Ideally, it's grazed in strips to minimize trampling losses. However, it can also fail. If you allow the crop to lodge, fall over, or let it mature past the digestibility window, you're left with impressive tonnage but poor energy content. A 10-ton field effectively behaves like a 4-ton field when fermentation time significantly limits intake. That's precisely why these systems can be either rockstar performers or total disappointments. Done right, warm season biomass systems can replace winter hay for 1 to 3 cows per acre. Done poorly, they look amazing but provide inadequate nutrition. That leads perfectly into our next topic, perennial systems. Now, let's look at the acre that surprises people the most, perennial shrubs and tree fodder. This system might not look particularly impressive at first glance, but on a dry matter basis, it quietly competes with even your best annual forages. Here are some typical numbers. Mulberry coppice can yield 3 to 5 tons of DM per acre. Hybrid poplar strips, 4 to 7 tons of DM per acre. Willow fodder, 2 to 4 tons of DM per acre. Elaeagnus, autumn olive, around 2 tons of DM per acre, and it also provides higher protein and nitrogen fixation benefits. When you combine these strategically in silvopasture configurations, you can regularly achieve 6 to 10 tons of usable DM per acre once the system is well established. But the biggest advantage isn't simply tonnage, it's digestibility stability. This is the key insight that most grazers miss. Tree fodder maintains its digestibility far longer into the season compared to warm season grasses. Why? Because lignin accumulates much more slowly in leaves than it does in grass stems. The leaf-to-stem ratio remains favorable even late in the season. Protein levels also don't crash as dramatically as they do in annual biomass giants. Trees store sugars in their leaves, and as a result, animals maintain higher intake levels. That single factor, stable intake, is why a 3-ton tree system can sometimes outperform a 10-ton grass system. Does it replace hay? Yes, very reliably, if the management is dialed in. Coppice on a 2 to 3 year rotation. Use narrow strips integrated with ground-level forages. Graze at controlled pressure to avoid bark stripping. Keep animals moving and don't let them camp under shade trees. When done well, perennial fodder doesn't just replace hay. It provides multi-year feed stability that annual systems simply can't match. This is the acre for people who prioritize consistency over the boom and bust cycles of annual cropping. Now for the system most people underestimate, cool season relay cropping. This is the acre that's built on careful timing, strategic layering, and skillful management. One example rotation that works well across Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and even Australia involves the following: rye, then peas, chicory and plantain, followed by brassicas. Here's what each layer typically produces. Rye stockpile, 1, 5 to 2. 5 tons dm, chicory and plantain, around 1 ton dm. A brassicas mix, 2 to 4 tons dm, relay peas, 0. 5 to 1 ton dm. That gives you a realistic total of 4. 5 to 7. 5 tons of usable dry matter per acre, right in the target zone for replacing hay. What makes this system so powerful isn't just the yield, it's the quality curve. Winter sugars stay high, which translates to better energy. Brassicas remain highly digestible late into the fall. Chicory extends grazing windows when grasses stall. Animals maintain intake without battling high NDF levels. You're essentially stacking growth curves, so something useful is always peaking at the right time. Does it replace hay? Yes, very often. 1 to 2 cows per acre is common, 3 cows in favorable climates with tight management. But this is definitely not a set-and-forget acre. This is not a casual system. The timing has to be precise. For advanced grazers, though, it's one of the most reliable ways to produce winter feed without relying on warm season moisture or the long establishment times of tree crops. Here's the part that ultimately decides everything, and it often has little to do with how much forage is standing in the field. Most 1-acre hay replacement failures occur because winter intake collapses, not because the acre didn't grow enough forage. You can have 8 tons of gorgeous-looking forage and still come up short if the animal can't eat enough of it quickly enough to meet its daily requirements. Let's break down the specific reasons why intake crashes in winter. Frost significantly shifts the sugar curve. After the first hard freeze, sugar levels often spike in cool season forage, which is beneficial. But warm season crops tend to lose energy rapidly. Animals naturally shift their preferences, and intake closely follows energy content. NDF and ADF levels hit thresholds that slow down the rumen. When NDF climbs past the mid-60s or ADF creeps too high, the fermentation time in the rumen stretches out considerably. Longer fermentation means slower turnover, fewer bites, and ultimately, lower total intake. When intake drops, cattle effectively move into a maintenance mode. You'll notice it. They stop grazing aggressively, their bite rate slows down, and they start standing instead of actively moving and grazing. At that point, it doesn't matter what the acreage yield was. The animal physically can't meet its daily dry matter target. The rumen slowdown cycle takes over. Once bite rate falls, saliva production decreases, pH rises, digestion efficiency plummets, and the animal enters a negative feedback loop where it simply cannot catch up. Even with plenty of biomass available, this is why high biomass systems often fail when managed casually, and why modest yield systems succeed when digestibility remains high. Yield is not the bottleneck, intake is. And that's the critical lens you need when we lay out the 3-acre models. Let's make this practical. Here are 3 real-world acre types so you can see which one aligns best with your context. Asterisk Scenario A, warm climate acre, southern U.S. system, high biomass annuals like sorghum, Sudan grass, cowpea mixes, and millet. Real output typically replaces winter hay for 2 to 3 cows per acre. This works because these systems can produce 6 to 12 tons of dry matter. Caveat, requires skill. Success hinges on precise seeding dates, canopy transitions, and managing moisture levels effectively. This acre thrives in warm climates with consistent moisture. Asterisk Scenario B, temperate acre, Midwest/Northeast system, relay crops, rye, peas, chicory, and brassicas layered to provide a rolling feed curve. Real output reliably supports 1 to 2 cows, occasionally 3 in forgiving climates or exceptional years. Total usable DM is about 4. 5 to 7. 5 tons. Caveat, requires skill. Success depends on precise seeding dates, canopy transitions, and managing moisture timing effectively. Asterisk Scenario C, silvopasture acre mulberry, poplar, and shrub system. Mulberry, hybrid poplar, willow, and Elaeagnus strips with ground layer forage. Real output reliably supports 1 to 2 cows after the system is established, typically after 3 years. Produces 6 to 10 tons of DM per acre once established. Stable digestibility translates to stable intake. Caveat: requires skill. Timing and moisture control are paramount. This acre thrives in warm climates with steady rainfall. The truth is that no single acre works the same for everyone, but every farm type has a system that can replace hay if the management is tight and well executed. This framework gives your audience something solid and actionable, regardless of their climate or forage base. So, here's the bottom line, the point people often argue about online, but the math simply doesn't lie. Yes, 1 acre can replace your winter hay bill, but it only works if that acre produces at least 4 to 5 tons of usable dry matter, and the forage is digestible enough for animals to actually eat it. To make it work on your farm, use this simple framework. Biomass your acre must produce a minimum of 4 tons of dry matter. More is generally better. Digestibility you need 50% digestibility or higher. Low digestibility will kill intake long before it affects yield. NDF ceiling keep NDF under 60%. Once you cross that threshold, the rumen slows down, and the entire system falls apart. Intake animals must consistently consume at least 1.6% of their body weight in dry matter. If bite rate falls, nothing else really matters. Losses weather, trampling, and spoilage losses must stay below 35% combined. That's your usable DM reality. Layers you need at least 2 crop layers, annual and perennial, or warm season and cool season, to protect the acre from seasonal swings and timing failures. Meet these 6 criteria, and the acre will pay for itself every winter. If you'd like a customized version of this acre fitted to your specific climate, whether it's a silvopasture system, warm season annuals, or relay crops, just drop a comment, and I'll map it out. Have you tried any of these systems on your own farm? How did they perform for you? I read every comment. Subscribe for more in-depth regenerative farming breakdowns, and we'll see you next time.